to what was found on Trayvon Martin's phone. I can just look at what it is that you're seeking to have introduced without having his testimony proffered and make that decision. Is that what he's going to be called for? Is that he was able to obtain certain information, either text messages, videos, or pictures off of Trayvon Martin's phone?
That's correct.
Okay,
That's
can
Mr.
I please
Black's
see what it is that you're intending to introduce through him? And I don't need to hear his proffered testimony.
Your Honor, I believe there needs to be a proffer of his testimony.
No, there needs to be a proffer of what you're seeking to introduce by way of pictures through him. I don't need to go through.
In order to explain it to the court so that the substance is clear, it's necessary for Mr. Conner to talk about how and where he found the information on the phone.
All I need to know is that he found information on the phone. That doesn't go to whether or not that information is admissible. His testimony of what procedure he did to find something on the phone is not the relevant factor for what you're trying to do. What you're trying to do is introduce certain either photos, emails, or text messages. That's what I need to look at. So can I please see what it is that you would be seeking to introduce by way of evidence through Mr. Conner?
Yes, I can outline that, yes.
Well, I'd like to see what it is. You have it there in your hand.
Yes, Judge,
Okay.
I do. I have several pieces of information that were obtained in different ways from Mr. Martin's phone. As the court is aware, this issue is actually ongoing because of the way the discovery has gone in this case. We got a report from the state on June 4th, and we're still trying to process that. But from information that we were provided in discovery sometime in late February, Mr. Conner was able to do some of the extracting. So there are two main issues. One relates to several conversations by Mr. Martin attempting to acquire a firearm.
These are conversations that are audio conversations, or are they written?
They are text messages that were obtained from his phone, but that's a secondary issue. We'll have a separate exhibit.
Well, no, it's not secondary because that's an authentication issue. If it is his if it's his voice, then that may not be an authentication issue. If it's a text message, it is an authentication issue.
Yes, and I need Mr. Conner to talk about authentication, but to cut to the chase, if you will, on the crux of the matters that relate to the fighting issue. That is the crux of this proffer. It's Mr. Martin's text messages about being in a fight, about the effects of that fight on him, that he got into a fight, that he lost the first round, won the second and third round, bloodied the guy's nose, wasn't done with him yet. A confirmatory text message with another friend, Michael French, confirming that he was in the fight and explaining that he, meaning the opponent, got more hits in the first round because he had me on the ground and I couldn't do anything. A Facebook post from Mr. Martin's half-brother, Demetrius Martin, asking Trayvon Martin, when you're going to teach me how to fight? And the first text message I was paraphrasing, the one is to a person named Lavandria. I have the text of that here. I have the, this was in a hidden file in Mr. Martin's phone that was password accessible only, in addition to the password required or swipe code to get into the phone. So this was a second level of access that was necessary. I can mark them individually or as a composite. One came from the hidden text messages that Mr. Conner found. One came from a hidden Facebook post that was in an application that was hidden. and then another from the Cellbrite extraction report from Michael French. So I would like to offer Mr. Connor's testimony to explain how he was able to access the phone and what steps were taken that would show that really, realistically, only Trayvon Martin could have created these texts or engaged in these conversations.
Okay, state.
So I'll mark these here for the court to review.
Okay, we'll mark them as composite exhibit NN for the defense, for identification. And
It's a three-part. The first one with Lavandria is the more detailed text explaining about the fight that he had just been in and the 3 rounds, etc. The other one has to do with the sort of confirmatory text message to this fellow Michael French shortly the next day. And then, of course, the separate Facebook posting by Demetrius Martin to Trayvon Martin's Facebook asking when he was going to teach another fight. We also can authenticate another way, if the court wants me to go ahead and proffer that as
Please.
well.
did you have some others that you, I have the CV of Mr. Carter marked as 00 for identification for the defense. Was N the 3 sheets that you gave me, all that you're seeking to have introduced through Mr. Connor?
Well, that's the stuff that relates specifically to the fighting. And then there are other exhibits that relate to the gun. And I'd like to, if we could, deal with the fighting issue, because that's the crux.
Okay.
That's the crux of this.
Then-
Let me assemble, I guess, the other material on the gun. That consists of, Your Honor, some pictures that were retrieved from Trayvon Martin's phone that were taken by that phone of that show a hand wrapped around a firearm, believed to be a Smith & Wesson firearm. We'll provide that. And then there are a series of conversations that occur around February 18th, just before Mr. Martin is coming to Sanford, Florida, where he has several conversations with several people attempting to acquire a firearm.
Mr. Guy, you want to address defense exhibit N for identification?
Sure, Judge Guy, I don't have a copy of it.
I can provide Mr. Guy another copy. He does have this information. In fact, we got it from him.
Judge, we do have it, but it's in volumes. I didn't know specifically what they pulled out. Judge, we're right back where we started with the motion in limine that I filed before the trial. In the Munoz and Singh case, where in an instance where 2 people do not know each other, specific acts are inadmissible because they don't help the jury with the reasonableness or apprehension that a defendant may feel because he has no idea who this person is. This is not reputation evidence, which otherwise might be admissible under these circumstances. Furthermore, in addition to an authentication issue, how do we know what whoever wrote this is talking about? I mean, this could be a verbal fight, this could be a play fight, this could be a slap fight. We have no idea. It would completely mislead the jury and be prejudicial. It's the kind of thing that is inadmissible for a reason. It would do nothing to aid this jury. It doesn't tell us about Trayvon Martin. It certainly doesn't tell us about what George Zimmerman knew about Trayvon Martin, and that's why the court granted, I think, this initially, is because there is no evidence that they knew each other, and therefore specific act evidence, which this is completely inadmissible. If I can just touch on the gun, if the court will allow me to, or not.
I really haven't heard the
Okay.
argument or proffer from Mr. West about that. He just mentioned that he intended to, so I'd rather you wait.
I guess in summary, my objection is it's inadmissible. It's rank speculation as to what any of this means, who sent it, what it was about. You know, if you look carefully at these, there's no context to them. They're pulled out at certain times, and we don't know any conversation that surrounded them. It's just completely misleading, and therefore it shouldn't be allowed. And I provided the Munoz and Singh case to the court
Can I have that?
prior to trial. Singh, S-I-N-G-H. Judge, that's all I have regarding the text regarding
Okay.
final.
Any further argument from you, Mr. West, regarding the text?
Yes, I have Connor's testimony. If the state claims that these are out of context, because we can put them in the context on which they were on the phone.
Well, I'll allow you to proffer as long as I don't go into a long proffer about Mr. Connor's qualifications and his background and all of that. I would like to keep it just to where he found this for the purposes of the proffer. So if you can limit it to that, I will allow the proffer.
Also, and we can ask Mr. Connor to testify, I do think his qualifications are important.
I have him here in a CV. For the purpose of the proffer right now, I don't. You said he got them from a place that was a second-level access. If you would like this court to understand what he means by that, I'm happy to hear that proffer. For the purposes of this proffer, I really don't need to go into his qualifications. I have his CV here. It's 00. I can read it.
Yes, ma'am.
So
The other issue I'd like to point out to the court before we do the proffer is that Mr. Guy's argument completely misses the point as to why this information is admissible. This isn't reputation evidence under Munoz. This is evidence that directly relates to the physical abilities and capabilities of the individuals at issue. That's a jury instruction that the court will give that directly relates to Mr. Martin's knowledge of fighting, that he had participated in a fight, that he knew, in fact, what it was like to be on the bottom.
well,
and not,
Mr. Connor is not going to testify as to what was intended by this, is he? Just where he found it and that he found it.
I'm suggesting that Mr. Guy's argument was misleading as to why it's admissible and the significance of it legally. So I don't want the court to think that I'm not responding to the argument because it wasn't the right one.
I'm really at the point where I want to hear the limited proffer from Mr. Connor. I'm not at the point to hear the arguments.
All right.
I understand that Mr. Guy gave an argument, but I told you I'd like to hear the limited proffer. So if we could get Mr. Connor in here, we can do that and take it a step at a time.
Right here, just put it through this.
This is a composite exhibit that relates to the gun matter, so I'll mark that as well.
All right, that will be double P.
Do you solemnly swear affirm the testimony presented will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Your Honor, for the purposes, could my client be outside the courtroom for 5 or 10 minutes, but continue with the proffer?
Are you waiving his appearance?
Yes, I am, Your Honor.
Okay, he may do so. Lisa here, they probably will need to recess. I'll wait until he...
There's another exhibit, it's a composite exhibit that I'll ask Mr. Connor to speak with briefly as well, that contain some photographs that were found on the phone.
Right, and they marked as defense composite double P.
I do.
May I inquire?
This is double Q. Yes.
No, that one,
Isn't that the one she was?
Double Q.
I'm sorry,
Double Q.
it is, yes, that's double Q. Good evening.
Good evening.
Please state your name for the record and spell your last name.
Richard Donald Connor, Jr., C-O-N-N-O-R.
Mr. Sorry, Judge. Thank you. Mr. Connor, prior to you taking the stand, we marked a copy of your CV, and it's been admitted into evidence. Is that correct, Your Honor?
It has not.
Would I so move?
Well, this is a proffer, so if Mr. Connor were going to be testifying in front of the jury, you can move it in at that time.
In order to save time, I would like it admitted into evidence so the court can review it and consider it part of his testimony
Well,
today.
unless there's an objection from the state, I'll review it as a composite, but because when something is marked as evidence, it goes back to the jury. The court hasn't made a determination yet as to whether or not Mr. Connor is going to testify, so I don't want that as an exhibit going back to the jury.
I didn't mean to suggest that it would be admitted into evidence for the jury. It would be admitted into evidence for this proffer for
Well,
this hearing.
then it wouldn't be marked as double N. It would be marked as one for this hearing. So do you have another copy, or do you want me to take that double N?
I have another copy. I was suggesting perhaps that since the jury doesn't get things that are only marked for identification, if the court marked it as defendant's proffer 1, then we would
Well, I'll
keep
have
it
to
straight.
remark that one unless you have another one that you would like to provide. Either way, doesn't matter.
I can retrieve that one, so I have one, and substitute another.
Well, the clerk can just mark that as Defense Exhibit 1 for this proffer. I just wanted to know if that's what you wanted to do.
For that, sure. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So, Mr. Connor, does your CV that's now in evidence for this proffer as defendant's 1 generally describe your background and training in the area of computer forensics?
Yes.
In addition to the training specifically as a computer examiner and in forensic computer analysis, are you also a licensed attorney in the state of Florida?
Yes, I'm a member of the Florida Bar.
Have you testified as an expert in the area of computer forensics to include extraction and analysis of information from cell phones in the past?
Yes.
Are some of those instances set out in your CV?
Yes.
Are you certified by Cellbrite?
Yes, I went to their training. At the end of the training, was certified in logical and physical.
Are you generally familiar with whatever their most recent software program is for cell phone analysis?
Yes.
And do you have a licensed copy of the current version that's available to the private sector?
Yes.
And did you use that software in whole or in part to analyze the phone that was represented to be Trayvon Martin's?
Yes.
At some point in the discovery process in this case, did you receive what's been known as a bin file?
There were several bin files, yes.
Was there a bin file that you received sometime in perhaps late February or early March that was represented to be, in effect, the data dump from the flash memory of Trayvon Martin's phone?
Yes, I believe it was February 23rd.
And did you have an opportunity to use your Cellbrite software and other software that may be available to you to begin the process of analyzing the data on Mr. Martin's phone?
Yes.
Were you able to identify text messages, Facebook posts, and such that had been deleted or otherwise hidden from a cursory examination of the phone?
Yes.
Would you describe generally what your process was insofar as the use of the Cellbrite technology?
Well, when you load the data into the Cellbrite physical analyzer software, it runs a series of scripts basically, and analyzes and then parses out the data. For example, the names in the contact list, the calls in the phone call log, text messages, emails, the pictures, videos, songs and music, things of that nature. It parses them out. I think it's called the analyzed data section of the report.
Okay. Did you, when you began this process, did you have an opportunity to look at the report, the printout, if you will, that FDLE had done in connection with this phone?
Yes.
And when you did your own analysis, did it indicate to you there may be additional information on the phone that had not been provided in report form by the state attorney's office?
Yes.
And what did you do then with the bin file, if you will, and your other resources to try to capture or identify what information that was missing from the state attorney's report?
Well, the report is only a report of what the Cellbrite reads and interprets and parses. The bin files is more like the physical image of the phone's data, so it contains all the data, all the files, all the free space and everything. So when I have the bin files and I've loaded it into the Cellbrite physical analyzer software, I can then examine any file that's from the phone, whether or not Cellbrite was able to parse it or analyze it.
Was there something that struck you when you began the process of analyzing the bin file and comparing it with the report that the state attorney's office had provided?
Yes, one of the first things that I did was in the Cellbrite report that I received from the state attorney's office, for each section of the report it lists how many items are there, how many pictures, how many videos, how many text messages, things like that. And so I looked, when I loaded it into my Cellbrite, at the total numbers to see if they matched, and I noticed that one in particular, the picture number was off by about 600 pictures. I had 600 more than the FDLE report did.
Did that make you think there may be some additional information on the phone that was not part of the report?
Yes.
And what did you do in order to try to find those pictures?
I tried to figure out which pictures were different and whether they were all located in the same area or areas.
We're talking about comparing this FDLE report with what your preliminary indications were from your own software run with Cellbrite.
Correct.
When you got the bin file in late February, did it include an updated report from the one that had been previously provided in Discovery without the bin file?
At some point, there was a second report, yes. It was somewhere around late February, early March, I believe.
Was it substantially different than the first one in that it contained did it contain any of those 600 photos, for example?
No.
At some point, did you later get an FDLE report that appeared to have some of the additional data that you were later able to find?
Yes.
And when was that?
I believe it was the week before this trial started, first week of June, I think.
That was the next time that report was, that was the next updated report.
Yes.
So let's talk about what you did then in order to try to identify the data that was on the phone but not part of the report that the state provided. So were you able to extract additional information by your own application or use of the Cellbrite software?
Are we talking in general or still talking about pictures or?
Identify it however you choose. Once you realize there's more data on this phone than what was in the report, what did you do to try to find it?
I did a couple things. In terms of text, I started running some keyword searches, physical keyword searches against the bin files. I also, one of the things I do is I look through, the Cellbrite report did list the databases on the phone, and I started looking through the databases to see what program or app they belonged to, what they did, and what they contained. So those are the two main things that I did.
Were you able to identify some additional photos that were not part of the report?
Yes.
Did those photos include pictures of a handgun?
Yes.
Did those pictures include a hand wrapped around the grip of the handgun?
Yes.
And when you analyzed that, were you able to determine that the pictures of the hand on the handgun were taken by that phone?
Yes.
Were they?
Yes, they were.
Do you have... I'm sorry, Mr. Connor, if I could approach, please, and show
Yes, you may.
Exhibit PP. This is more than just pictures. If you would take a look at it, though, and generally describe what that exhibit consists of.
Including the text?
Yes.
There are several text message exchanges where Mr. Martin was either trying to purchase or sell a handgun. And then there are there's actually two copies of the two separate pictures, one of the handgun on a table or something, and then the other one where it's lifted off the table is in somebody's hand.
You were able to find those text messages on the phone?
Yes, they're on the phone.
And were some of them deleted?
Yes, they were, yes.
Is your software able to recover deleted text messages?
Well, they were marked as deleted, but they were still, the data was still on the phone. So each picture had a deleted version, although the data had not been overwritten, so it was still there. And there was another version that was still on the phone intact.
When someone who has a picture on the phone or a text message they don't want and they want to delete it, is that a purposeful action taken by the user of the phone?
Objection, that would call for speculation.
Sustained.
Is this something that happens by accident or as a result of the phone itself, or to delete the images and text messages? Does that require the operator of the phone to do something?
Usually, yes.
Explain if you would.
Normally, pictures, for example, will stay on the device until they're deleted or removed. Text messages, depends on the phone, but will often stay on the device until deleted or removed. That being said, devices go bad, memory cards go bad, and it technically is possible for something to get deleted without the user intending to delete it. So that's why I said it's usually user initiated.
If you were trying to determine as an expert whether this was an action by the user or a malfunction of the phone or something, would you be able to look at the text messages that were deleted within the context of others that weren't?
Yes.
And were some of these text messages deleted and scattered within other text messages that weren't?
That is correct.
As an expert, is it your opinion that these deleted messages were because of an act of the person on the phone?
Objection, calls for speculation.
Your Honor, may I?
It can be deleted by anybody. That is speculation.
Anybody, yes, perhaps, but.
But you're asking him to speculate.
No, I'm not asking him who did it yet. I'm asking him whether the text messages were deleted because of an action someone took.
Okay, well, that question would be allowed.
Yes.
Yes.
Is it your opinion that the text messages relating to the gun that show deleted were deleted by someone on purpose?
Yes.
Okay. Were you able to determine if the phone had a passcode or swipe code of some kind?
Yes.
Did it?
Yes.
What does that mean?
That means that you cannot access the data on the phone unless you input the passcode.
If you don't know the passcode, can you operate the phone?
Perhaps maybe an emergency call, but other than that, no.
Do passcodes typically time out? So that if you access the phone over a period of time, is there something in the phone that will cause it to become secure so that the passcode has to be re-entered?
Yes. For example, you may have to wait 10 minutes to try again to get in, and that time may increase each time you put in a wrong passcode.
Let's talk about what happens if you put in the right passcode and you get access to the phone. If you put the phone down and don't use it for a period of time, the phones typically have a default where they go back to the point that after several minutes or what have you, that you have to re-enter the passcode.
Yes.
Any reason to think that's not the case with this phone?
I believe there's a configuration file, and I don't recall what it said about the timeout period, but I believe it did have a default timeout period.
One would suggest, I take it, that if it didn't have some sort of timeout, that you'd only have to enter the passcode once and it would remain open forever, essentially.
Until manually locked or restarted.
Which would sort of defeat the purpose of the passcode.
That's generally correct, yes.
Is there any other information you can tell the court about that set of text messages that relate to the attempted acquisition purchase of a firearm?
Sorry, anything else that I can?
Well, are there identifiers on these text messages, who sent them, and whether or not it was sent to Trayvon Martin or by Trayvon Martin?
Yes, the messages will state which folder they are in on the phone, for example, an inbox or a sent folder, who the other party is, whether the message is incoming or outgoing, the date and time of the message, the status of the message, whether it was read or sent. For example, the content of the message, and then the status of the message, whether it was deleted or whether it's not been deleted.
Is all of that indicated on the extraction reports you have there?
Yes.
Was there a conversation between Trayvon Martin's phone and a person identified by name and number as Ron Cuevas Fulton about purchasing a .22 revolver?
Yes.
Were these conversations concerning the acquisition of a firearm clustered in date?
Yes.
When was that, please?
Yeah, just the ones with Qua Fulton, or all the ones that we have here?
All of the ones that you have regarding what seems to be the acquisition of a firearm.
Between February 18th of 2012 and February 22nd, 2012.
And how many separate collections of text messages do you have there on that?
Several. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. I think there's at least 4.
With different people?
Yes.
Can you identify who those people are from the information on the phone?
Yes.
Who are they, please?
One is Qua Fulton. That's one. There's another group that there's two other people involved in addition to Mr. Martin, but I think they run together as one kind of conversation. That's the other parties are Spoonhead Zach and Jay. And then there's another set of conversations that with another person named Ron. There's conversations with a person named Dario, and another conversations not about purchasing but about a gun with Diamond. And I think that's it.
Did you...
Fruit. I don't think I mentioned fruit.
Fruit?
There's a conversation with fruit also.
This collection of conversations were all between February 18th, 2012 and February 22nd, 2012?
Yes.
Were there some text messages on the phone where Trayvon Martin was talking about coming to Sanford?
Yes.
Are you generally familiar as when he was planning to come to Sanford from reviewing those text messages?
Yes.
Tell us, please.
I believe it was February 20th to 21st, around that.
And
those days.
you know enough about this case that he was killed on February 26th.
Correct.
Let me show you another exhibit. This one is marked Defendant's QQ for the proffer. Let me ask you if this is based upon information you received from the phone.
Yes, it is.
What is it?
This is a picture that appears to be of Trayvon Martin that was resided on the cell phone, his cell phone.
Does it appear to be a self-taken picture?
Yes, it does appear to be that.
Was that picture taken with that same phone that you analyzed?
That I'm not sure. There's no metadata in the image that identifies the device the picture was taken with.
What is metadata?
Best description I've heard is it's data about data. So for example, in a picture, very often if you take a picture with pretty much any digital camera or cell phone these days, within the picture file itself will be data about the picture, the make and model of the phone or camera, maybe the focal length, the date and time, maybe GPS coordinates, all kinds of data about the picture itself. That's metadata.
Are you able from that metadata to learn more about the circumstances and the device where the picture was taken?
When it exists, yes, it often provides additional detail for us.
You said this photo appears to be Trayvon Martin. Is that based upon other photos that you know exist that depict Trayvon Martin that you've seen either on the phone or online or on TV?
Yes.
were you also able to extract a series of text messages and other postings that appeared to relate to Mr. Martin having been in at least one fight?
Yes.
Let's talk about how you were able to recover the data on the phone that related to that extraction.
There was data on the phone in a database that was not parsed or analyzed by the Cellbrite software. And so when I went and manually looked at the database, I saw that it contained what appeared to be text messages. And then when I looked at the database and the configuration file associated with the database, the database appeared to be created by an Android app called Super Android SPC, I think. And when I researched that, I saw that it was an application that was designed in part to hide text messages. And basically what it did was text messages that were subject to this application were not put into the main text message database that you think of when you look at an Android phone. It was placed into another database that was only accessible to this Super Android application. For that reason, I believe it was not parsed or analyzed by Cellbrite, but when I went and looked at it, I could see the data was there, it was in plain text, and I could extract it and analyze it.
How did that get your attention? What made you think there's more here even than what running Cellbrite had revealed to you about the missing pictures and such?
There were a couple things, and I don't remember the exact order or which one was the final tipping point, but one of the things I was doing was running keyword searches, and I was getting hits of what looked like text messages, but they were not in the parsed text messages in the Cellbrite report. That was one indication. Another indication was the SPC database was listed in the databases, but there was no parsed data from it in the report. And then I know I'm missing this one other indication, but I think those were the two primary ones, the search results, and then when I eventually got to look at it, I could see that it contained what appeared to be text messages.
Is that something that you were piecing together, realizing that there was more on the phone than what was indicated in the report from FDLE that provided by the State Attorney's Office?
Yes, and I think you need to keep in mind when I originally got this data, there were certain things I had been asked to look at. So there were other things that I noticed that I was kind of noting in my mind and putting on the back burner until I got to them, and this was one of them. And
thinking that there might be something else going on, you mentioned a hidden app. Were you generally familiar with the existence of those sorts of things?
yes, I knew that those type of apps existed.
And what did you do in order to find the hidden app on this phone and then get access to the information that had been previously hidden?
Probably ought to describe what I mean by hidden. When we're using the term hidden, it's hidden from the user of the phone, unless you know the app and the code. So if you wanted to see these hidden text messages, if you were holding the phone in your hand, you would have to pull up the app, and it had a passcode, and you have to put in the passcode, and then you could view these text messages. So they're hidden from the user of the phone unless you know how to get to them. Once I get the phone, they're not exactly hidden. They're not parsed by Cellbrite, but they're not hidden either. Once I locate the database and I access the database and view the database, I can see the data in plain text. So it's not parsed by Cellbrite, but then again, it's not hidden by the application from me either.
Are you saying that there is a passcode necessary to unlock the phone so the phone can be used, and then a second passcode that would have to be entered into this application to access these text messages?
That is correct.
So in order to get access to the text messages, arguably you'd have to know both passcodes.
Objection to leading, speculation, and argument.
Sustained.
May I have a little leeway with an expert to lead so we just stay on track, Your Honor? I will rephrase it, though. How many passcodes would it take to get access to these hidden text messages if someone handed you the phone?
At least 2.
Would that be the access code necessary to open the phone up for any purpose?
Yes, you'd first, if the phone was locked, you'd have to put in the passcode to unlock the phone. Then you'd have to locate the app that was hiding the text messages and put in the password for that app. And then you would get access to the text messages.
How would, if you were unfamiliar with the phone, how would you know what app that was?
You would not know. You'd have to try to find and maybe see if you got lucky finding the app, and then you'd still have to enter the password.
So for someone else to use the phone, they would have to figure out the first passcode in some way.
The phone passcode, yes.
And then they would have to figure out that there was another hidden app on the phone that had text messages.
Correct.
And then figure out what the passcode was to access that application.
Yes.
And then at that point, would they be able to send and receive texts?
Yes, they would be able to see the texts that were being hidden by that application and probably respond to those text messages.
Well, I suppose if someone had gotten through those levels of security, they could, you said they could respond to the messages or delete messages or something, but...
Yes, they would basically have the access that the user who set up the application, the password, would have.
When you were looking at the context of the text messages, in the regular texting and also in these hidden files, did you consider whether it appeared that someone else was using this phone to send text messages and delete messages other than Trayvon Martin?
That's always something that we look for and keep in the back of our mind. At least I do. So yes, that is something that I took into consideration as I was examining the data.
Were the text messages that you've extracted relating to the gun and fighting, which we will talk about, contained within a larger conversation with the same person typically?
Yes.
And did those conversations appear to indicate a relationship between that person and Trayvon Martin?
Yes.
I'm losing track of my thinking here, but were you able to collect the various text messages from whatever source related to firearms and assemble them in the exhibit before you?
Yes, that is what I did.
Let's move to another exhibit. This one's been marked for identification in this proffer as NN. If I could approach the witness.
Yes, ma'am.
Are you familiar with that exhibit?
Yes.
And what is it, basically?
It's a composite of data relating to fights or fighting.
Did all of that data come from Trayvon Martin's phone?
Yes.
And did you extract it in some fashion or another?
Yes.
You mentioned earlier that there was a database that was accessible through the hidden app as opposed to through Cellbrite.
Again, there's accessing it by the user or accessing it by me. If the user's trying to access the data, they have to go through the special app and the special password. Cellbrite, from my point of view, Cellbrite does not parse or analyze the data, but it is there, and I can manually access it and view it using the Cellbrite software.
Looking at the first page of Exhibit NN, I think is the one before you.
Yes.
The header at the top has an identifier as spc.db log sorted by person.xlsx. Could you explain that, please?
Yes, I created this spreadsheet, and it comes off of the phone, and the database is the spc.db database. That's what it's named on the phone. A database, in this case it's a SQLite database, and a database consists of several tables. So for example, in this is the log table as named by the application, and it's a log of the text messages. There are several other tables. One, for example, may be the contact or name table. It'll have the names of the persons that he was texting with or in the address book, their phone number, etc. So, and this is presented to me in the Cellbrite software in a table, and I can then use the Cellbrite software to export it basically into a spreadsheet, which is what I did. And my software named it by beginning with the name of the database on the phone, spc.db, the table in the database, this is the log table, and then appending the Excel extension to the name of the file.
From a longer conversation in this thread with the person Lavandria, were you able to extract a conversation relating to a fight?
Yes, there were other messages going back and forth between Mr. Martin and Lavandria, and I extracted these specifically because they did relate to a fight.
And does your spreadsheet show the phone number of Lavandria?
Yes.
And you know this to be from Trayvon Martin's phone?
Yes.
And are you able to tell from the spreadsheet and your analysis which of the two sent and which of the two received the messages?
Yes.
Are you also able to identify the date and time that these messages were sent?
Yes.
What is the first line in your exhibit of text?
The number or the content?
I have a larger extraction here. So what's the first line of text on your exhibit?
WYD question mark, which is what you doing?
You recognize that to be text code or slang for what you doing?
Yes.
And who sent that?
Lavandria sent that.
And did Trayvon Martin respond?
Yes.
What did he say?
Tired and sore.
Did Lavandria respond to that?
Yes.
What did she say?
Me too, but what happened to you?
I'm going to ask Mr. Connor that you do the best you can to pronounce the way it's actually written.
That's what I was attempting to do.
Okay. So when Lavandria said, me too, but what happened to you, what did Trayvon Martin say?
Fight.
And what did Lavandria say after that?
Letter Y, exclamation, question mark.
And what did Trayvon Martin say to her?
'Cause man, that nigga snitched on me.
And what did she say to him?
Bay, why you always fighting? Man, you got suspended.
And what did Trayvon Martin say in response?
Nah, we thumped after school in a ducked off spot.
And what did Lavandria say?
Oh, well, damn me.
And what did Trayvon Martin say in response to Lavandria?
I lost the first round, and it's got the kind of the happy face, I guess the colon and the parentheses, but I won the second and third.
And then did he repeat that with a different smiley face, the frown as opposed to the smile?
Yeah, it's basically the same, but it's I lost the first, but won the second and third.
And did Lavandria respond?
Yes. Oh, so it was 3 rounds with a question mark. Dammy, well, at least you won, LOL, but you need a... Actually, there's another couple words on that.
Can you read that whole line?
Yes.
I can show you my copy.
I've got a copy also.
Okay.
But you need to stop fighting, Bay, for real.
And did Trayvon Martin respond to Lavondria?
Yes.
What did he say?
No, I'm not done with fool. He gonna have to see me again.
Did Lavondria respond?
Yes.
And what did she say?
No, Bay, stop. You ain't gonna be satisfied till you get suspended again, huh? With a question mark.
And what did Trayvon Martin say?
No, but he ain't breed enough for me. Only his nose. But after that, I'm done.
The text that you read said breed.
Yes, but he ain't breed enough for me.
If that were a typo and it were an L instead, how would it?
Objection, speculation. If,
I'd have to sustain as to speculation.
Have you seen typos before in text messages that you reviewed as part of your phone analysis?
My analysis in reading this is that the word breed does not make sense and is not what was intended.
What would make sense?
Bleed,
With an L, bleed.
with an L, bleed.
Judge, I'll renew my remark for my objection as to speculation. As to that
Sustained.
remark, has to be stricken.
Your Honor, I would not want the record stricken. This is a proffer. This is, unless the court hasn't ruled. Did the court rule on Mr.
Ruled on
Mann?
his objection to speculation. It is what it is. What's written there is written there. What the person intended or not, he cannot testify to. What he believes may make sense may not make sense to the author of it. So that's just speculation on his part. My ruling stands.
Have you, in your training and experience and work analyzing phones, computers and phones, have you had occasion to try to make sense out of text messages or computer messages that weren't grammatically or accurate from a spelling standpoint?
Objection relevant.
Overruled as to relevance.
Yes.
In the context of this text message sequence, as you try to sort out the data on the phone and make sense of the conversation, does the word breed as opposed to bleed make sense?
I think when you put it in the context of the rest of that message, referring to not enough and only his nose, yes, I think they're talking about bleeding from the nose.
Thank you.
Objection.
If you would,
Sustained as to speculation.
were you able to, by analyzing the data on Mr. Martin's phone, find another conversation around that time that seemed to reference that fight?
Yes.
And to whom was that text message?
Michael Suave French.
And do you know that person from information on the phone? Did you have his contact information and other conversations between Mr. French and Mr. Martin?
Yes.
And what is the conversation that Mr. French and Mr. Martin had connected with this fight?
Mr. Martin sent a message to Mr. French stating, yeah, because he got mo hits in, yeah, because he got mo hits because in the first round he had me on the ground and I couldn't do nothing. And then Mr. French responded, dang, bro.
Is that the end of that sequence?
Yes.
Did you also find a reference to fighting by a relative of Trayvon Martin?
Yes.
Who is that person?
Demetrius Martin.
And what did Dimitri, where was that information located or posted?
It was on the phone. It was in a Facebook database. I believe the name of the database is FB for Facebook.db. Inside the database, as in the other SBC database, there are different tables. One of the tables in this database is called mailbox threads. And this particular message was in the mailbox threads table of the Facebook database on the phone.
And what did the message on this mailbox, Facebook mailbox thread say?
It was from Demetrius Martin, and it said, "When are you going to teach me how to fight?"
Do you know from other information Demetrius Martin's relationship to Trayvon Martin?
I believe there's some kind of brother, half-brother related with the same, sharing the same father.
What makes you think that?
Because there's one other message in the Facebook database in the mailbox thread table from Demetrius to Trayvon, asking Trayvon if Dad had a Facebook page.
You believe, based upon the context of these conversations, that Demetrius Martin was talking to Trayvon Martin about their common parent?
Yes.
Were there other references to fighting or questions? Were there other discussions in the context of your review of the text messages where people discussed fighting to some degree?
Yes.
You didn't extract those for this exhibit because you couldn't find them directly related to this event? Is it, or?
Correct, or because I could not put it in date, time, or who sent them, yes.
Your Honor, I would move the marked exhibits into evidence for the purpose of the proffer, please.
Well, we'll have to take them out of where they've been marked in the case. So NN will now come in as defendants 2 to this proffer. PP will come in as defendants 3, and QQ will come in as defendants 4 to this proffer.
In summary, Mr. Connor, sort of identifying the different places on the phone where you found information to direct the court as to what the overall scope of your work was that's reflected in some of these reports. There was some information in the report that FDLE filed initially that you were able to verify within the bin file?
Yes.
And then there was additional information in the bin file that you were later able to extract that was not contained in any FDLE report that you received prior to about June 4th.
Correct.
And there was information in this bin file that you were able to extract from applications that were hidden on the phone?
I'm going to object to leaving and already asked an answer.
The jury's not here. It's fine. Go ahead.
Is that accurate?
Yes.
And to do that, to get the access to the hidden application, you had to download some software, figure out what it was all about, and review what was otherwise not visible on the Cellbrite reports?
No, no. It was not parsed or analyzed by Cellbrite. So I had to manually identify that it was on the phone and then manually go access the file or the data and look at it. The Cellbrite did not present it for me. I had to manually go find it and look at it and analyze it.
And
Which I
some
did.
some of that report is reflected in some of the pages of the exhibits before you,
Correct.
as well as some information that may have been extracted through the Cellbrite software itself.
Correct.
And then photographs that you were able to extract from the bin files.
Yes.
That would include a
Oriented.
picture of Mr. Martin, the sort of profile picture.
Yes.
And the pictures of the handgun with the hand that we talked about.
Yes.
I don't remember if I asked you this. Were the pictures of the handgun with the hand taken by Mr. Martin's phone?
Yes, they were taken by the phone.
Cross?